Good evening. I'd like to call the March 10th, 2020 regular City Council meeting to order. Deputy City Clerk, may I have a roll call, please?
Mayor Brown?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Krupa?
Here.
Councilmember Meyer?
Here.
Councilmember Percival?
Here.
Councilmember Wright?
Here.
Thank you.
Next it will be our invocation, and tonight we have Jim Lineberger from Interfaith Council. First will do the invocation, and followed by Councilmember Percival, who will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Real quick before I do prayers, is on. The community pantry has over 1,000 rolls of toilet paper, and we're selling them for $10 a roll. Yeah, we're the only ones that have it on the shelf. So, with that, let's go into prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this evening tonight, and we ask you, merciful God, to be with each and every one of us throughout all the people in this valley, the leaders, the organizations, all the people out here, our service, public service, safety people. Lord, today we ask you, as every day, to give these leaders of our city guidance, give them understanding, and give them vision into our future of our city. As we continue to face many challenges, we must remember that there's been many blessings and many good things happening, and we thank you for this, Father. We can't do this on our own, so we need you to guide us, to strengthen us, give us courage, give us wisdom, give us integrity and honor. And we thank you for tonight, and we ask you in your heavenly name to continue to bless us. Amen.
Please join me in this pledge to our great nation. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. May be seated.
Moving on to item 4. We came out of closed session, and City Clerk, may I have a report on closed session?
We met in closed session, but there was no reportable action taken.
Thank you very much. That brings us to item 5, communications from the public. Anyone who wishes to speak during public comment on a particular item will be required to fill out a speaker slip. These slips must be turned into the city clerk. Each request will cover one speaker. Those who wish to speak must submit their own request to be called on by the mayor. There is a 3-minute per person time limit for all comments, including public or quasi-judicial hearings. Written comments on any item may also be submitted to the city clerk to be included in the meeting record. However, they will not be read aloud. All who wish to speak, including council members and staff, need to be recognized by the mayor before speaking. Members of the public shall comply with adopted rules of decorum, Resolution 4545, a copy of which can be requested through the city clerk's office. And as a reminder, please turn off or mute your cell phones and electronic devices while the meeting is in session. Deputy City Clerk, do we have any requests from the public to speak?
No, Mayor, there are no requests to speak at this time.
Okay. Thank you very much. Moving on, presentations. We have no presentations this evening, so that takes us to receive and file item 7. Can I have a motion on item 7A?
Move to receive and file.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote.
So we'll do it by voice. Mayor Brown?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Krupa?
Yes.
Councilmember Meyer?
Yes.
Councilmember Percival?
Yes.
Councilmember Wright?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, the motion passes unanimously. Moving on to item 8, consent calendar. All consent calendar items will be acted upon in a single action of the City Council unless otherwise requested by an individual council member for separate consideration. Are there any members of staff that would like to pull an item?
We wouldn't like to pull one, but we just have a corrected resolution for item 8C, and that should be in front of you on the dais.
Okay. Anyone have that corrected? Okay.
748B. And Article 8C.
That it? Okay, so we have one remaining item, item 8A.
I'll
We have a motion on
Move to
item.
approve 8A.
Second.
Please vote.
Not working. I'll do a roll call. Mayor Brown,
Yes?
Mayor Pro Tem Wright, Councilmember Meyer.
Here, yes.
Sorry. Mayor Pro Tem Krupa.
You got us both at the same time, yes.
Councilmember Meyer,
Yes.
Councilmember Percival.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, that motion passes unanimously. You know, it's kind of like when a traffic signal goes out and you have to put a cop out there directing traffic and people really don't know how to respond. So, we're slaves to our electronic devices, but we'll muddle through. Okay, item 8B.
Yeah. So when I was looking at this, and I appreciate the additional correction, the correction that we received here at the dais. But my question is, when it showed on the map, it only showed where streets A and B were, not C and D. And I'd like to know where those are. And then it didn't show D. And I see you had that here, so that's great. But only A and B was shown on the map as to where they were.
It's a little hard to read, but the street A is the horizontal long street
Yeah, I got A
on
and
the north,
B.
and the B is that loop. The C is that little cul-de-sac along street A.
Take me for a minute.
So there's that little knuckle or cul-de-sac adjacent to street A.
Between 91 and 86?
Correct.
Okay.
And then the street D is way on the corner by lot 54 and 49. It's a little cul-de-sac street.
Okay. And they currently have homes or don't have homes on those?
These are brand new truck.
Okay. All right. What's up against the end of Lion?
Yes.
It's at the very end of Seven Hills Drive.
Well, it's actually Lion. But Lion still is not gonna go all the way through, is that correct?
Correct.
So you're not gonna be able to get to these lots, off of Lion, only off of inside the track?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
Okay.
I just wanna know where they were.
Mayor, I have a motion on 8. Okay.
Oh. No,
We have a motion to approve and a second.
Mayor Brown,
Yes?
Mayor Pro Tem Krupa,
yes,
Councilmember Meyer,
yes,
Councilmember Percival,
Yes.
Councilmember Wright.
here, yes.
Thank you.
And that passes
Here, I
unanimously.
say yes.
Item 8C.
Chief, I have a few questions for you on this.
Sure.
The 74, I just want you to explain the reason that we have $74,000 for 3 days a week and why that justifies not having a staff person per se versus, you know what I'm saying?
Good question. Thank you. And Mayor, members of the council, good evening. 2 points I'd like to make with this. First off, I apologize for the edit we had to make on the error that we found. It was transposed some numbers, so the corrected amount is reflected in the new resolution you have in front of you. Take a journey back to 2017 when we had the benefit of Measure U. That was our first spending plan. One of the action plans that was identified early on in our deployment analysis was evaluating what type of administrative support we had for our paramedic program. This is unique for several reasons. We need a medical director. That's a physician. That's Dr. Hannah that we have under contract. That's a separate contract. And we need a nurse professional that is qualified in advanced life support, critical care, and brings to the stage, if you will, those skill sets as part of our requirement as a EMS provider in providing paramedic service. So what this position does for us is provide that valuable education, helps them with their licensure and certification. Those skill sets are not at the paramedic level. That is at a licensed, registered nurse level. And that is why we contract out. The other benefit of that, obviously, is it's a contracted position. We only have 32 hours. When we did the assessment, that was 1 day a week. We, as you know, started our paramedic program in November of 2014. One of the things that is very important to that is quality assurance, making sure that our paramedics are educated, provide the ongoing support that they need to get better at what they're doing, and that's the purpose of the position. So to answer your second question, we have no one at that level that meets that need, and contracting provides us the maximum flexibility and cost containment to expand or contract as our budget dictates. Hopefully that answered your question.
The other question I have is, now we did not bid for this.
No. So this is an extension of the existing contract that was approved originally, and it is confusing. The previous original agreement, when we came to you as part of the Measure U spending plan to increase the hours to 96 from 32, was executed in 2017. That's tied into the Measure U. And that expired in January of 2020. We anticipated going to we had a registered nurse, critical care nurse, one of our Mercy Air chief flight nurses that was willing to take the job. Fantastic opportunity. However, AB5, and I'll look to our city attorney and we did, had an impact on how we were going to apply that. This company that you're considering is part of the original contract. It meets the litmus in terms of being okay to use in this capacity because they have other contracts, similar type of function. And we actually have Militia Schmidt, Art Durman, and Jessica Lopez, who's part of the cadre that we have available to us for our paramedics for their training.
Awesome. That's all I need. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't have a question, but just to comment for the record, since we have the amended up here and the folks out there don't have it, the change in the amount was from $74,840 to $74,880. So I just want everybody to be clear that the change was for $40 in the resolution that we have.
Thank you, and apologize again for that.
Any other questions or comments from council? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve it.
Second.
Okay. Roll call vote, please.
Mayor Brown?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Krupa?
Yes.
Councilmember Meyer?
Yes.
Councilmember Percival?
Yes.
Councilmember Wright?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Chief. That takes us to item 9, public hearing. City Council's procedure for public hearing will be as follows. The mayor will ask for a staff report and clarification of items presented if needed. The mayor will then open the public hearing, asking for comments for those in favor of or in opposition to the item, followed by a rebuttal to any comments made. The mayor will then close the public hearing and ask the city manager to respond to any questions raised by the public. The public will not have the opportunity to respond at that time. The mayor will then bring the discussion back to the city council for direction or action. So we have item 9A, and we have a staff report.
Good evening, Mayor Brown and council members. Veronica Allen, Management Analyst in Finance. The purpose of this public hearing is to provide the community an opportunity to express their interest or concerns to the council on the draft Citizen Participation Plan, which have been made available from February 10th to March 2nd. During this time, no public comments were received. The Citizen Participation Plan contains the City of Hennett's policies and procedures for involving the community in the development of the multi-year Community Development Block Grant Consolidated Plan, the Annual Action Plan, the review of the consolidated annual performance and evaluation report, and the use of CDBG program funds. The proposed citizen participation plan includes edits made to names of staff due to changes in personnel, minor formatting edits, and change in the HUD Los Angeles office contact information. No revisions were made to approved policies and procedures adopted on October 22nd, 2013. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Veronica. Any questions of staff? Okay. So I will now open the public hearing. Are there any requests to speak on this item?
No, Mayor, there are no requests to speak.
Okay. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and again refer to council. Any questions or comments on this item? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion on item 9A.
I'll make a motion to approve the recommendation of item 9A.
Mayor Brown,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Krupa,
Yes.
Councilmember Meyer,
Yes.
Councilmember Percival,
Yes.
Councilmember Wright.
Yes.
Thank you.
That motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good evening again.
Okay. Item 10A is the management analyst Alan will give us a staff report.
Good evening again. At the February 25th council meeting, the 2021 CDBG funding allocations were brought to council for approval. We had one agency, Valley Restart Shelter, who requested if there were any way funding could be allocated to their shelter program. The item was continued for the ad hoc committee to meet and discuss further. The ad hoc committee met on March 2nd and were able to reallocate funding that was going to Valley Restart's technology request to their shelter program. This is partly due to Valley Restart leveraging other funding sources for their technology needs. The HUD funding allocation also came out, and the city's allocation is slightly higher for 2021, which enabled the cap for public services to increase. This public service increase of approximately $4,300 was allocated to the shelter program, and the reallocation of the funds initially in technology, giving Valley Restart an allocation of $16,305. At this time, it is requested that the council approve the 2021 CDBG funding recommendations as presented in attachment 1 of your packet for incorporation into the draft 2021 annual action plan. The next steps is the completion of the draft annual action plan and the 5-year consolidated plan. The plans will be made available for the required 30-day public review and comment period no later than Monday, April 6, 2020, to meet subsequent CDBG 2021 program funding deadlines. Following the 30-day public review period, this matter will return to the City Council for a mandatory public hearing and a final council adoption. Submission to HUD of the final 2021 annual action plan and the 2025 consolidated plan must occur before May 15, 2020, in order for the city to receive 2021 CDBG funding. At this time, the ad hoc committee and I will be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Veronica. Do we have any requests to speak on this item?
Yes, Mayor, there's one request to speak from Susan Larson, I believe. Larkin?
Mayor and City Council members, Linda Rogers, Executive Director of Valley Restart. I just want to take a moment to say thank you to the ad hoc committee, and particularly to Veronica for doing such a great job of figuring out a way to provide services and show that the city is really behind solving the issue of homelessness using Valley Restart as part of the solution. Thank you.
Thank you. There were no more public comment. Any members of council have comments or questions of staff?
I have comments. You know I have comments. And thank you, Linda, and thank you, Susan. Through this process, it's amazing what you read on a piece of paper and what you hear when you talk to someone. So many years ago, when I first got on council, our process and procedure for CDBG funding on the ad hoc was to hold individual interviews with everybody who applied so that we could ask questions from what was written and really get a better feel for what was needed by the nonprofit. I would like to make a recommendation going forward that we continue that process next year, because it really is amazing. When you look at something and on a couple of them, we looked at it and said, this is not eligible for the CDBG funding, the way it was written. But when you dive into the whole process and what the whole thing is, you find out that it is. It's just written down, and I always go back and listen. That little voice, Bonnie's little voice in my head, of when you go for grant funding, you have to go talk to these people, you know. So anyway, it turned out good. I really appreciate the conversation we did have, Linda, and I really appreciate you coming up. And I think it speaks well for the relationship we do have with nonprofits and the fact that they can object to what we have done and we respond to that and can make changes necessary to actually help out a program. So that's my comment. Got anything to say?
You don't. I'm just glad that we were able to make it work for Valley Restart so that we could allocate the funds, and it also got you guys to step out to be able to reach out to the service organizations to get additional funding where needed to fill those gaps. So I'm glad we were able to make it work out.
So based on that, I would like to make a motion that we approve what we did for the staff recommendation for the 2021 program year of CDBG funds.
Second.
Thank you all for doing that. You're welcome.
Thank you to the ad hoc committee for your work on that. Okay, I have a motion and a second to approve item 10A. Roll call vote, please.
Mayor Brown?
Yes?
Mayor Pro Tem Krupa?
Yes.
Councilmember Meyer? Yes. Councilmember Percival?
Yes.
Councilmember Wright?
Yes.
Okay, that passes unanimously.
If I could just add something. No, this is important. This is really, really important. For the first year of doing this in the city of Hemet, Veronica, you did an outstanding job, and I just want to say thank you very much for your professionalism and your ability to work with Mike and I.
Thank you.
But mostly Linda.
Giving credit where credit is due. All right, thank everyone for their involvement in that. It's a rewarding. No, it's not. And having served on ad hoc myself, it is. And I concur with your recommendation that the ad hoc committee consider doing it the old-fashioned way, because you really do miss something by not having the face-to-face. So hopefully we'll take that into serious consideration next time. Moving on to item 10B, we have a resolution awarding the purchase for one fire apparatus to the Rev Group in the amount of, these are big numbers for me, $738,824.00, authorizing the city manager to execute all documents regarding the purchase order. And we have a staff report from Fire Chief Brown.
Mayor, members of the council, thank you. I'm going to introduce this item and invite Battalion Chief Lloyd, who will be giving you the report as previously. But I'd like to give the council just a quick update since we met last. First, I want to acknowledge our apparatus committee, who has been working with our management team in developing and finalizing the specifications. We appreciate that effort. We also had a bit of a glitch last week. We were informed of a $27,000 price increase. However, I want to give credit to our management team who, through the relationships and the business side of what we were dealing with, were able to have a discussion with our apparatus manufacturer that that was not appropriate given the paper that the agreement that we had on the price that we originally agreed to. So the good news, there is no increase. That's off the table. Number two, Engine 1 is currently in this repair right now at the shop. Major engine repair that has been underway for the last couple weeks. I'm in touch. In fact, Charlie's tired of me calling him at home, but they're doing their very best to get that engine back in service. But I only mention that to underscore the importance of what we're trying to get accomplished here, and certainly not to put any undue pressure, but the engine is in sad shape right now. With that, I'm going to invite Chief Lloyd up, and we'll be open for questions at the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Mayor, members of council, thank you for your time. Coming back around to this again, as the fire chief was saying, currently we have a total of 7 fire engines and 1 aerial truck company that totals out 8 apparatus to meet our department's primary mission. 6 of these apparatus are considered frontline, which means they're used on a daily basis and they're available to respond to the different missions that the fire department is assigned to. 2 of those other apparatus are in a reserve status, and when we have a repair such as what Engine 1 has, those crews then transition to a reserve apparatus. And after a point in time, those repairs can outweigh the costs of replacing an apparatus. If you look at page 2 of your staff report, this gives you kind of a snapshot of our current fire apparatus. You can see that our oldest apparatus is aged there at 21 years. With a good number of them at 15 years or older. These start to wear. They have about 100, the largest ones or the longest running apparatus have about 185,000 miles on them. It's important to note on mileage because it's a little bit deceiving with fire apparatus, because when a fire engine gets to the scene, it doesn't shut the engine off, especially when it's in a fire. It will continue to operate and pump. And so it builds what we call engine hours. And so the engine hours are even more exponential. And so the wear and tear on those apparatus when they're running for 6 to 8 hours at a time pumping in a fire takes a toll on it over time. And not to mention the driving to and from calls and the wear and tear on the suspensions and the transmission. So it really is a complex piece of equipment. It's one of the most complex pieces of equipment that firefighters utilize. It not only carries tools, it carries water, it pumps the water, it is able to pump the water when it's moving, also when it's stationary. So there's some complex working pieces inside of that. That's kind of part of what brings it up to a cost of about $605,000 per engine. Right now, if we're looking at our current status, we could easily replace 3 apparatus right away. I mean, with the current state of the equipment. But realize that that's just not, in this current fiscal climate, it's not possible, and we're realists, and we want to not only work within the realm of realism, but work with a department and a member of the city as a partner with the city, several departments, one city, all working together. So that $1.8 million price tag is really out of the door. We did have an equipment replacement fund at one time that was funded early on, and then was defunded for a period of time, and you can see at the bottom of page 2 that it was funded from fiscal year 2015 through 2018. Then it was stopped, and then those funds were reallocated to help balance budget. Looking at that really led us to look at other financing options for apparatus, or looking at other purchase options, I should say more correctly. And so as a result of that, we've come to you not only with some recommendations for funding, but also wanted to give you a little more history on the recommendations of the committee. The apparatus committee, as Chief had alluded to earlier, exists to help provide the right tools and the recommendations to the management team as to what is necessary. And so as a result of this, the apparatus committee field tested a number of apparatus, one from KME, one from Pierce. They drove them around town. They looked at the compartments. They went through each of them. And one of those apparatus was from San Bernardino County Fire Department. It had a price of roughly $590,000. And then the one from Pierce was roughly about $700,000. And although they looked at the Pierce, and the Pierce is often known as the Cadillac, and not because it's a luxury item, but because of the build and all of those things. The apparatus committee realized that in the current state and where we're at and looking at things from a best value perspective, that KME apparatus would be able to meet the needs and the mission of the department. As well, that was a competitively bid contract through San Bernardino County that was awarded to KME, and so that provided us the opportunity to use an already competitively bid contract and be able to utilize that and come alongside them versus going out to bid on our own and having to work at possibly further delaying the process. The apparatus committee has also showed in past their desire to look at things holistically and to look at things from a fiscally responsible point of view. And I take this back to the medic units that you approved purchased. Originally, to replace one of the current medic units that we had, we were getting bids upwards of $225,000 to $250,000. The apparatus committee took that cost and took a look at it and said, you know what, we can do and fulfill this mission in a different piece. And so they were innovative and they looked outside of the box, and were able to purchase 4 apparatus for the price of 1. And so be able to replace an aging fleet, to be able to take some of the old utility vehicles and push them out of the fleet. So we're not necessarily increasing, we're just replacing and doing it in a fiscally responsible way. So when we look at our fiscal impact, to give some background, talking to the apparatus manufacturers, about 40% of municipalities are financing their apparatus now and looking at a rate of about 3 to 4% annually. We did, speaking with the finance director, got a quoted rate at 3.1% for that. The advantage of that is some fiscal predictability. This would be a lease purchase program, and although the term lease is used, it's really financing. You pay, what we were looking at was a 5-year term, and then at the end of that 5-year term, you pay $1 and the apparatus belongs to you. There's no large balloon payment or anything like that. So just as a point of clarification to understand, when we hear the word lease, and sometimes those thoughts come to mind. Our total cost with outfitting and everything runs at $738,000, $824. So what we have presented before you, one, is that based on the apparatus committee's recommendation, that the KME fire engine that was on the San Bernardino County spec is the one that will meet the mission of the fire department. So that's part one. And then the other part is to present 3 options to you for your consideration as far as purchasing. The first one would be to use a combination of earmarked Measure U funds. So there's currently $200,000 sitting in the Measure U account for fiscal year 19 and 20 that's dedicated to fire apparatus. And then what would be needed would be a supplemental appropriation of the remaining $538,824 to pay for that. That would be used out of Measure U fund balance. So then that would basically result in just a cash purchase of the apparatus. That would be option 1. The current Measure U fund balance to date right now is looking at about $3 million, $3,072,000. If we were to take out that $538,824 amount from the fund balance to purchase a fire apparatus, we would have a remaining fund balance of $2,533,695.26. This is a no interest option, and it makes the most fiscal sense if no other encumbrances are planned. So if other expenditures are anticipated, and unfortunately, as in part of the department with all of the things that we're looking at, deferred maintenance, there are other things within the department that may need some attention financially. And so we're looking at all of those options as well. Option 2 would be a $200,000 down payment and to borrow the remaining $538,824 from another internal city fund. There's currently $3 million in a fire DIF fund for the McSweeney development for a future fire station. That would be then borrowed against, and then the principal and interest would be repaid to that DIF fund and then to be used later on. The payments would be low enough, and the big difference between the cash option and this is that Measure U revenues would be used to purchase the apparatus over time versus fund balance on a one-time cost. So the fund from which the monies would be borrowed would be in generating interest income for that fund. Option 3 would be to make a $200,000 down payment and borrow the remaining $538,824 from a financial institution. This still option uses Measure U funds to purchase the apparatus, but used through revenues. And then that would be basically through a financial institution that we would then secure contract with. If we were to do that at a 3.1% annual percentage interest rate, the annual payment would be $116,471, and a total cost of the loan would be $582,355. So we go from that 538 to 582, so roughly about $49,000 in interest that we would be paying for that. So we do have a letter from KME with the quote. We do have a letter from them that confirming that they are going to adhere to the $604,000 purchase price that they had agreed to back in February. And then our goal is to move forward with that, work with all of those different aspects and pieces to be able to provide the people that are working an apparatus that's fit for their mission. And with that, I will answer any questions that you might have.
All right. Thank you, Chief Lloyd. Do we have any requests from the public to speak on this agenda item?
No, Mayor, there are no requests to speak.
Okay. Bring it back to council. Questions, comments?
I do have a comment. I know there was some conversation over the weekend, and the mayor brought up another option, which would be essentially to utilize funding that's accrued in the DIF to essentially make the purchase and then use Measure U fund balance or Measure U revenues in the future to make that payment back to the DIF moving forward. So Lorena is available to provide that information if the council would like.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So really using DIF funds, borrowing from a DIF fund to do this falls under option 2. We would borrow it, the most appropriate place to borrow it from would be the fire DIF, where we have money set aside for a future fire station, just under $3 million. We would borrow it, establish an interest rate, do an interfund loan, and then as the payments are made, the Measure U would pay the DIF fund that interest. And of course, with the recent changes in interest rates dropping 0.5%, whichever way we go, it's going to be more cost effective regardless.
And the other interesting note on that is essentially you're taking Measure U funds and then just putting it into the DIF. So any of the interest is money that you wouldn't have been able to utilize under Measure U because you've essentially used the DIF funds to make that purchase. So there is a loss of funding that you wouldn't be able to use for Measure U that goes to pay the interest for the DIF.
So really, the least expensive way to do it is to use Measure U fund balance. But that's a policy question, and it's what your preference is. Do you want to kind of have just stable annual payments over 5 years, or do you want to just pay it off, not have to pay interest to a bank or to another fund and be done with it?
A question. Since further development out that way, out Sweeney Ranch Way and in the surrounding community is expected in the near future, how soon would we need that fire station?
So let me add before the chief goes in. There's a couple different components that you're referencing. Yeah, one of the components is the demand for potential services out there, and the other side of it is the city's ability to fund and operate that fire station. And so there are two different concepts. The one that is going to probably take more time is the funding to operate that fire station in the future. But I'm sure the chief can provide some more commentary on that as well.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Only thing to add that we have been working with HP on potential sites. The Searle Delmagony Parkway site is no longer valid, so we have been scoping that out. I would say that's a short, medium term, 2 to 5 year projection for us to start considering service in that area. Did I miss anything with that?
No, what's really going to drive it is the financial ability to fund that throughout the year.
Not the building, but the operations.
That's correct.
The funding piece.
Well, all along I was leaning towards option 2. Anyway, so, I didn't see any reason to, if we're gonna pay interest, we might as well pay interest to ourselves. Makes a heck of a lot more sense. So,
Do you know what we're currently earning on our Measure U fund balance?
Less than 2%.
Well,
Less than 2%.
Okay, and then the same with the diff funds?
Yes.
Fund balance, less
Yes.
than 2. So even if we were to pay ourselves 2.5 or 2, we're making a little money, and it's not going to cost a whole lot.
Correct.
Aside from the most fiscal responsible way is to not pay any interest at all, pay cash for the whole thing out of Measure U funds. Which, and that $3 million fund balance that we have in Measure U, that's for on the fire side?
Yes.
Okay. All right. That's all I got for now.
Yeah, I would say to take it out of the Measure U fund also because it's going to save money in the long run. That'll be our cheapest route.
So your suggestion is option 1? To make the
option
cash
1.
purchase?
Mm-hmm. Because how much did you say it costs to outfit?
The cost of the outfitting is included in the total price. It's
About approximately.
About $75,000.
So we would be, that would be the money to outfit another engine that we would be paying in interest.
Yeah, it's that concept of either way, if you use the DIF to make the capital purchase, it's going to be purchased outright with the DIF funding. However, the concept is that you'd be using future Measure U revenues to pay down a loan from the DIF. And so I think what the Councilmember Meyer is referring to is that Measure U interest is going to be now allocated to the DIF versus it being allocated to or remaining in the Measure U fund. And I think that's what the core issue is. Do you want to have that $60,000, $70,000, whatever the dollar amount is, kept in the Measure U fund balance, or would you rather it be plugged into the DIF is really the question that the council needs to address.
One more question on this. If we were to do the payment route, it's considered a lease, so I'm assuming that with that lease, we're making sales tax payments with that monthly lease payment, as opposed to all up front. Because it's the difference between a purchase and a lease.
That would only be if we borrow through a bank. That would be option 3.
All right.
But even if we paid cash out of Measure U, there's still sales tax involved in that. So that 1% of that transaction is coming back to us.
Sales tax and Measure U tax. So it's 2%.
Okay. So no matter which option we choose, that's still coming back.
Correct.
I think part of what prompted my inquiry over the weekend to the city manager was in looking at these different options. I think fundamentally most of us would like to pay cash for anything that if we have the cash to buy something. So if I'm going to buy a new car, if I've got the cash to do it, that's the prudent thing to do, even though drive it off the lot and it depreciates immediately. But looking at this, we can say, yes, we have the cash to do that out of Measure U, but in doing so, we significantly deplete the fund balance, and not really knowing exactly what, I mean, we just saw the matrix of the aging apparatus, so to me, it might be fiscally prudent to keep a little bit larger fund balance in the Measure U as a rainy day situation. So I think I initially was leaning toward option 2, kind of as a win-win, because we would be borrowing from the DIF, but we'd be repaying the DIF, and we're still getting the Measure U revenue from that. And at the end of the 5 years of payment, we've actually increased the amount in the DIF, so we know that costs are going to go up for construction. So 5 years from now, if we happen to be in a situation where we could consider purchasing, having that additional interest going into the DIF from our annual payments could be a plus. So in my mind, and I'll freely admit I'm not a financial wizard, but in my mind that's kind of a win-win, option 2. And it would allow us to keep a larger portion of Measure U funds for those rainy day situations.
Mayor, may I make a comment?
Yes.
To that point, just for consideration, I think Chief Lloyd had mentioned when we came to you originally, it was in October, I believe, for the original request, we outlined kind of the number of strategic long-term issues that we're still dealing with. So I appreciate you acknowledging the challenges that we have, not only in addition to the vehicle purchase, but the other things that we're having to address. So I just will say thank you for considering that, and would just ask council to at least think about that component, because we're right in the midst of the budget planning process, looking at near, mid, long term, and how we're going to be able to adjust to that piece. So I just wanted to make sure that that was part of that. Thank you.
I do have one more comment to make. The passage of Measure U was a mandate to bring forth to this community better response, better community public safety. You had mentioned at the beginning that Engine 1 is in the shop with significant repairs that are needed. So I'll go on a limb and say that that's a rainy day, to your point of a rainy day fund. I think that from my position, I would look at option B, to borrow from ourselves, if the option was we need to finance this purchase so that we can get another engine on the road to be able to support our community. I think that with the balance, the fund balance that we have with Measure U, I think it's more of a financial benefit to the city to pay out of that, because that money is sitting there. And over the long term, it would be cheaper for us to make that purchase with that fund, because that's what that money's for, is public safety. And so that's what my recommendation is, that we move with a cash purchase out of Measure U, because that's what the money's for, and we've got an engine that's down. And I think that's a better position than having to finance. Like I would go with B if the only option was we need to make this purchase and we need to finance it. My recommendation would be that we self-finance it, but we have the capital to be able to make this purchase out of Measure U. The Measure U fund balance is going to get replenished over the next year anyway. We know that. I mean, based on...
Well, and $2.5 million is not exactly a low amount.
I'm sure we can do a lot. And as to Carly's point, I think that the amount of savings and interest can be used for other equipment that may be needed down the line.
Versus interest payments. I'm going to add a hailstorm to your rainy day. Okay? And give you the example that I'm looking at option 2.
because, I mean, it's self-fulfilling. We're borrowing from ourselves and paying back to ourselves with interest. But if that hailstorm hits and we need Measure U fund balance, you cannot use DIF to buy a fire engine outright. I mean, if there was nothing left in Measure U because there was some catastrophic need for something or else, and then we needed to have something more, you cannot then use you can't use DIF funds for that. Whereas this, we could leverage our DIF funds, have it paid back, and still have the hailstorm covered along with your rainy day.
Well, with that, what's the plan on that, and Chris brought it up, the plan for moving forward with the new fire facility? I mean, are we looking at short-term, long-term, like 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years?
So the city has run deficits for the last few years, meaning that it's not able to afford the level of service that it currently provides. So we would need to see some significant increases in revenues, property taxes, sales taxes, in order to even think about that. We're not in the position to even consider that right now, given our fiscal reality.
So we're sitting up here today just trying to decide if it's better to spend, let's see, $738,824, or is it better to spend almost $9, right, including interest? We're going to add $116,000 for interest? Is that what the interest amount is? $80,000 of interest. So it comes back to us. It comes back to us. Right. We're moving it, and it's coming back to us. It's not going back to the fire department or back to. Actually, it is. It goes back to the fire department, no matter which pot it's in, because if it's in Measure U, it's for their current operating expenses. When it goes back into the cash amount is still, like, we're deciding if we should pay $80,000 more for this engine or not. I don't understand how we can keep going down this road of thinking that, hey, let's pick the more expensive option.
Well,
I guess we'll get to vote on it.
The more expensive option would be to go to a financial institution. That's the most expensive
Right,
option.
but we're not entertaining those. We're entertaining these two options right now, as far as that's what people have preferred. That's what you guys have spoken to say.
The third one, no one preferred.
Right?
Yeah.
So out of the two options that we're talking about, we're deciding, is it better to spend $80,000 more or not?
It's not spending the $80,000.
Yeah, Lorena, maybe you can,
It will cost the Measure U. It's actually closer to $44,000 in interest, but that money will come out of Measure U to pay the interest to the DIF fund.
DIF fund to build a fire station.
For a future fire station, or a DIF fund doesn't say, a DIF is to increase services because the city has grown, basically. It's kind of a simplistic way of looking at it. So it doesn't mean we have to get a sixth fire station, but if we need to add an engine, not replace an engine, but add an engine to increase services, DIF funds can be used for that.
And it really comes down to, is the council okay with utilizing $45,000 of Measure U funds that could have otherwise been kept in the Measure U fund, or would it rather use that $45,000 and increase its DIF? That's really what the question is.
I mean, we're paying ourselves. We're going to.
So, yeah, is the preference for the council to increase the DIF by $45,000, or is the preference to keep the $45,000 in Measure U?
well, but if we go with option one and we make the cash payment, and as I said, you know, pragmatically, generally, most of us would say that's the prudent thing to do. But those of us in our personal financial situations don't have the option that we have of essentially borrowing from ourselves and repaying ourselves, and so I guess for me, yeah, $2.5 million is a nice chunk of change to have sitting in Measure U. But if we go with option two, we have a much larger amount retained in the Measure U fund balance, which to me, based on what we know about the needs of our fire services, is overall probably a more prudent decision.
And especially with,
5 years will go by. 5 years will go by really fast. Well, it's paid off.
That's true.
So,
especially when I was out knocking on doors trying to get Measure U to pass, I didn't tell one person that we were going to save and sit and hoard this money. So awesome. We're going to try to keep as much in the bank as possible. We said we're going to use it for our city, and we're not. But instead we're going to shuffle it around and move it over to another fund. Let's vote on it.
Okay, well, we have a couple of components of this. One is to award the purchase of the apparatus to KME. So we could take that as one part of the motion and deal with that.
I'll move to approve that we move forward with the purchase as recommended by staff.
to Cammy.
To KME as the recommendation.
Okay. Can I have a second? A second by Bonnie. Roll call vote, please.
Mayor Brown?
Yes?
Mayor Pro Tem Krupa?
Yes.
Councilmember Meyer?
Yes.
Councilmember Percival?
Yes.
Councilmember Wright?
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes unanimously. Now, the second motion would be for the funding option, Jill. Somebody want to try a motion on that?
Well, you could take one at a time.
Just somebody make a motion.
I'll make a motion that we go with purchase option 1 and make the purchase with Measure U funding as opposed to just sitting on Measure U funding. But my motion is to approve the purchasing through option 1.
Okay. Do I have a second? Okay, second by Carly. A roll call vote, please.
Mayor Brown?
No?
Mayor Pro Tem Krupa?
Yes.
Councilmember Meyer?
Yes.
Councilmember Percival?
Yes.
Councilmember Wright?
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes 4-1.
You guys got yourself a new engine.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and please convey our thanks and appreciation to the Apparatus Committee. I know that that's a daunting undertaking, and it's a fun thing to do, but actually weighing through all of the options and everything. I did have one technical question for you. It just popped into my head when you were talking about the hours of an engine. When the engine is stationary and pumping, obviously they've got the RPM up really high to run the pumps. And so with the engine sitting still, it's not driving, so you're not getting air movement. Does that pose a problem with the fire engines overheating when they're in that static situation and pumping?
In certain situations, it can, but it's also something that the apparatus manufacturers have taken into account. So there's two things. One, they build oversized radiators to be able to handle that. Two, the other thing is remember that we carry about 500 gallons of water on that truck, and there's actually mechanisms in place that run that circulated water from that water tank through another radiator system to help keep it cool. So it works on a couple. But as things progress and as things go older, and those become less efficient. So where you see the overheating problems come in is as the fire apparatus age. But yes, it's a good question, and they have done a couple of